Listen folks, I am wrong a lot. It's actually one of the things I am best at, being wrong. And when Genesis invited me out to Minneapolis, Minnesota to check out the new GV80 Coupe, I kind of figured it's gonna be just like the SUV with a bit of the back cut off. And I was completely wrong. As always, because this GV80 has an entirely different engine compared to the SUV and an entirely different personality. And in this video, we're gonna take it for a ride, show you around it, and tell you everything you need to know about the GV80 Coupe. Let's go. The GV80 SUV, the sister car to this coupe, has two engine options, a 4-cylinder and a 6-cylinder, both with turbocharged power. However, the coupe takes it up a notch. So the base model coupe actually has the twin-turbo V6 from the top dog SUV, but then there is an option exclusive to the coupe variant of the GV80, which is this engine. So it's still a twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6. However, it gets a 48-volt electric supercharger. Now that brings the power up from 375 to 409, and it brings the torque up from 391 to 405. But the crazy part is, even with that additional power and torque, it gets better fuel economy, 20 mpg combined in the supercharged version versus 19 combined in the standard V6 twin turbo. So a pretty cool engine option. Now, like I said, 4-cylinder, not available in the coupe. It's only the twin turbo V6 and the twin turbo V6 with the supercharger. The supercharged model also gets launch control and it gets an additional drive mode as well. So there are some pretty substantial changes between going from the twin turbo to the electric supercharged version. Pretty cool. Driving the Genesis GV80 Coupe, let's talk about 3 really good things and 3 not so good things. The first thing about this GV80 Coupe are the seats. These seats are incredible. They are perfectly positioned, at least for my body type. Not too firm, not too soft, and one really cool feature is when you change the drive modes, the bolsters will actually tighten or loosen depending on which mode you go into, so it really forms to your body. They're heated, they're ventilated, we got some massage in here. This is a comfortable, refined seat, in my opinion, the best in class. Number 2, this car is a good cruiser, especially when you dial it into comfort mode. Now this does have an electronically variable suspension, and Genesis says they use the ADAS cameras to actually scan the pavement in front of you to adjust the suspension for bumps, potholes, that kind of thing. And in comfort mode, this thing is an absolute cruiser. It's also really quiet in here and just very refined. And number 1, I think Genesis does a really good job of balancing design and usability and comfort. So yeah, it is a coupe design and you do sacrifice a little on headroom as well as a cargo space, but it's not that dramatic. This is still an SUV that feels usable as an SUV. You could still put dogs and friends and whatever in the back seat in the trunk. Don't put your friends or your dogs in the trunk, but you know what I'm saying, your Costco run, and still have enough space for that. Where some of, especially the early approaches at an SUV coupe, like the Acura ZDX, just sacrificed everything for looks, the Genesis does a good job at that balance. Time to check out the inside of the GV80 Coupe. Now this vehicle does have my all-time favorite luxury feature, soft closed doors. Get the door close to the jamb and it will suck itself closed. Now, keeping in that more sporty attitude than the SUV, the coupe does offer some different color options, and I really do like this dark blue with the red, or is it orange, piping. So we see it here across the seats, diamond stitching across the back and the bottom of these seats, and check out these seat belts. Pretty aggressive for a Genesis product, a brand usually associated with comfort and luxury. Now let's check out some other changes. First of all, we do have the aluminum pedals, which is pretty cool, and a different steering wheel design than the SUV. So you might notice this is a proper flat bottom steering wheel with paddle shifters, and that orange stitching continues here on the airbag. Now the rest of the interior, fairly similar. Couple of other changes: carbon fiber trim, not my first pick in a luxury SUV, but it is well integrated with a pretty cool little pattern. And then of course the focal point of this interior is that enormous 27-inch screen that extends pretty much the entire width of the driver's view. So it's one integrated display between the driver and the main infotainment screen with no division, although in Apple CarPlay you do see a division, and that is one of my first complaints on this interior. This vehicle does have Apple CarPlay, and let me demonstrate that to you now. However, I do have to use a USB cable because Genesis says wireless is coming via an update, but it isn't here yet. So I got my phone. We're gonna go ahead and plug it in just like that. A little tricky to do one-handed, and we'll check out that wireless or that wired CarPlay, see how that looks. So I'm gonna push CarPlay here, and you can see there is now a more clear division between the instrument cluster and the main gauges there. But overall, the screen is pretty good. The resolution is really high. Some of the menus not as explanatory as I'd like them to be. One of the cool things about this vehicle is you can actually change the brake feel because it has an e-booster instead of a hydraulic booster or vacuum booster. Now you might expect to do that down here in the drive mode settings, but you can't. What you have to do instead is go into setup, then we're going to go into vehicle, then we're going to go into drive mode, and now we can change the brake feel from comfort to sport or back to comfort, depending on if you want to make it more linear or more comfort in its response. Now, I would prefer just a shortcut here to take me to like drive mode settings, but that's what Genesis has done. And there's a few examples of that throughout this instrument cluster in general. But overall, it is fairly self-explanatory, and I do really like the resolution. It looks very good. You can see some of the features incorporated here, and one of my favorites is the mood curator. I'm going to boot this up. This will actually change not only the sound, but the smell and the whole ambiance of this vehicle. So I've gone into the delight setting here. So it's going to start playing quiet, comforting music, and then it turns this screen from a fairly standard infotainment screen into almost like a little art gallery. So kind of cool features there. I don't know if you'll find that useful, but it is something you can do. One other cool feature is this does have digital key too, so you can use your phone as a key for this vehicle. It does work now on Apple devices, unlike some of the earlier versions, and start the vehicle and drive it that way. Steering wheel feels great. We've got all the safety gear, lane centering, adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, everything you'd expect in a vehicle of this caliber. And they also give you the little integrated mirror cameras. The overall comfort in here is excellent. Feature set pretty high. Not only do we have, like I mentioned, the scent, heated steering wheel, ventilated seats, heated seats, all of that here, dual zone automatic climate control, everything you'd come to expect in a vehicle of this price point. And then we have drive selector here, park, reverse, neutral drive, and then you can also use the little rotary knob to control the screen itself. So overall, a nice interior, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more sporty than what we'd find in the standard GV80 SUV, but not that drastically different. If you're familiar with that vehicle, you'll be fairly familiar with this one. Nothing is perfect. Let's talk about 3 things the Genesis GV80 Coupe could improve upon. Number 3, so Genesis has made a big deal in the presentation of this car to us journalists about how it is a much more sporty experience than the SUV version. They talked about how only the Coupe gets the E-supercharged version, and there are changes here and there, and it's supposed to be a much more aggressive, dynamic driving experience. I am not sure they have done enough. And actually my drive buddy today, a really cool dude named Zach Dole, we'll be sure to link his stuff below, pointed out something interesting. And Genesis has teased an upcoming Magma version, which is probably going to be more like an M competitor. But as it sits, here I'm going to go for a pass here, it is fairly quick. Yes, no doubt, over 400 horsepower, but it doesn't feel that much different than the standard twin-turbo V6 GV80 SUV. Maybe a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more response in the low end of the RPM range, but this is not an engine that's really encouraging me to go out on a fun, twisty road. Part of it, it doesn't really rev that high, and it doesn't seem that happy in the upper kind of fun range of the tachometer. It's not as smooth as the inline sixes from some of the German brands. It's fine, you know, it really is fine. Personally though, for me, because it doesn't offer that much more seat of the pants experience compared to the standard V6, just get that engine. It's a little bit down in MPG, 1 MPG combined. It's down, I don't know, 30 horsepower, but it doesn't feel that much different in the real world. So save some money and get the base engine. The second thing I think Genesis could improve upon with both the GV80 Coupe and the SUV is some additional form of electrification. And I'm not saying go fully electric with the GV80 electrified, but I would really, really, really like to see a hybrid, or especially a plug-in hybrid version of either one of these cars, and that would be a way they could introduce more performance into this vehicle without having to reinvent the whole powertrain setup. Provide this vehicle with an in-transmission motor or a plug-in hybrid setup that gets you 450, 500 horsepower and 30, 40 miles of all-electric range. That'd be a really cool way to differentiate the GV80 from from some of its competition, at least from a performance standpoint. Is like, look, maybe what they do with the GV80 Magma is they don't reinvent the whole powertrain. What they do instead is they add a massive electric motor on the rear axle or in the transmission and give this thing 600 horsepower. That'd be a really cool thing to do. And the number one thing I think Genesis is going to struggle a little bit with when it comes to selling the GV80 Coupe here in the States is that brand on the steering wheel, which is a total shame in my mind, because without a doubt, this brand is easily, from an engineering design comfort standpoint, up there with the best of Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, Acura, whoever you want to put this brand up to. I mean, they are building some top-notch products, but a lot of folks in the US really, really, really care about that brand stigma, right? And Genesis just hasn't built it yet here in the US. And especially when you're spending $87,000 on the vehicle, the reality is a lot of folks want to spend $87,000 on a vehicle that's going to impress their neighbors. And yes, if your neighbors saw this vehicle, they would be pretty blown away because the design is amazing, but are they going to know what Genesis is? And I'm here to break that stigma. I don't want to contribute to that. Buy a Genesis GV80. But I'm not sure I'd get the Coupe over the SUV. So the Coupe kind of starts out price-wise where the SUV tops out in the very high 70s, and then by the time you get them fully loaded, you're going to be knocking on the door of 90 grand, which is a lot of money. And yes, it looks better, but the standard Genesis is such a looker anyways, the standard GV80 SUV. Just get that one, get a little bit more space, get the same engine on the base standpoint, skip the e-supercharged one with the launch control, which is kind of cool, but is anyone really going to use that? Yes, you're not going to get the Sport Plus mode and a couple other little things, but I would just get the GV80 SUV. I think it's a more well-rounded package for most Americans. Unless you really, really, really love that swept back look, that's the one to get. Time to check out the rear seat of the GV80 Coupe, and the big question is, how is the headroom? Because that is always one of the big concerns with these coupe fastback style SUVs, rear seat headroom. It's actually not terrible. 6 feet tall with this huge flock of hair that I gotta cut. If I sit bolt upright, I can bury my head into the headliner, but it's pretty usable for most folks, I find. Very comfortable rear seat overall, and you don't lose that much versatility back here from a rear seat standpoint. Now let's check out some of the legroom here. Driving position about 6 feet tall. Yeah, pretty good. Got enough space. Got a rear seat pocket here. This vehicle does have the 18 speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system and a lot of other features back here as well, including heated and ventilated outboard rear seats, as well as power recline. So a comfortable back seat and not as compromised as I initially thought when I first saw this design. Pretty good sized trunk. We do have our little view blocker there as well, so you can fully encase anything back here from prying eyes. See if you've got any under floor storage. Got a little bit of a tire inflation kit underneath there, and there is a sticker on this GV80 Coupe. Time to check it out. 87,780 as configured in this bearing blue paint and the NFC key card. So almost $90,000. It does start in the high 70s, which is fairly competitive with a lot of its German competition. Sorry to use the same word twice, but yeah, I mean, it is possible to get X6, especially in the M configurations, well over $100,000. Same thing with the AMG Mercedes. Even a GLE 53 is going to start in the 90s. So price-wise, this is fairly competitive with a lot of those vehicles in the segment, and it starts at $79,000 if you want to sacrifice that supercharged, e-supercharged twin-turbo V6. So here's the thing about this GV80 Coupe. Driving it, at least for the few miles I have on this trip, it's pretty soft and squishy. Regardless of what mode you go into, this is a luxury cruiser. And I know Genesis is trying to market this as a more high-end performance version of the GV80. They're not there yet. I would just embrace this as an ultimate cruiser that happens to have a fastback that looks great. That's where this vehicle is in my mind. Is it a value proposition compared to some of the German stuff? A little bit. You know, it is a few $1,000s cheaper than like a GLE 53 AMG, but it's still $90,000 or knocking on the door. So it's not like a crazy value that, you know, some of the entry-level Genesis products are. But if you look at this as a really stylish, really comfortable high-end cruiser, this is a great car. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Huge thank you to Zach for holding the camera and putting up with my nonsense today, and we'll see you in another video.